Rabbi Block, what was your connection with this property where the shooting occurred?
The shooting occurred at the what was once known as the Torah Hashem Synagogue, and now the Valley Community Kollel. It's a shul that I built. It's a synagogue that I founded. It is has been in existence for nearly 40 years, and I was the rabbi for nearly 40 years.
In the area, there was recently a fellow arrested waving a machete outside a synagogue. There was also a bomb plot that was thwarted in the valley here. What about in your actual vicinity? Have there been problems around the shul?
Well, we had problems, particularly 35 and 30 years ago, with an arson fire that devastated and destroyed one of our buildings, and we had to rebuild. At the time, Mayor Bradley came to the press conference of 150 members of the press showed up and declared it the worst hate crime in the history of the city of Los Angeles. It was a terrible thing that had happened to us, but we were invigorated by support and given the strength of courage to rebuild, and we did, in a most magnificent manner.
What's the situation with the apartment building opposite the shul that the Russians or Soviets, former Soviet immigrants live in?
We have very little knowledge of that. I mean, the people are pretty relatively quiet to keep to themselves. We have our own property, and we see them from time to time, say hello, and whatever, and cordial, but that's about it.
There have never been problems with there before?
With the immediate vicinity people, no.
But if a Russian or a Chechnyan, a Ukrainian is shooting at someone who's clearly a yeshiva student or an Orthodox Jew outside there, would you consider that a biased motive?
Yeah, in the sense that Jews are a target.
But that someone would be shot because they're Jewish?
Right. The Jews are a target of, he may not particularly know anything about Jews. He may not even care about Jews. But once things get public and once it becomes apparent that things go on in this country and are allowed to go unchecked, for instance, so then people will do anything once they realize they got a green light. So for Jews, there is a green light.
Is there a known risk that Orthodox Jews are assuming by going into suburban areas that are largely Gentile and maybe even mixed, that Jews are putting themselves at risk, knowingly taking a chance?
There's a known risk living in the United States of America. You can go to a mall, you can go to a movie, you can send your kids to an elementary school, and they're all at risk. Anyone in the United States is at risk. That's the bottom line. And we are part of that. The tragedy of our country is the tragedy of having exposed new vehicles of expressing your frustrations, and those vehicles are being manifested by those people that lack control. But once the vehicles are allotted or opened, the green light is opened in terms of certain behaviors, so then anybody who's nutty is going to do it. Now, let's say I'm upset, I'm frustrated, and I'm a little mentally off, and the thing to do is to find someone to punch him in the nose. So I'll find someone to punch him in the nose.
Just to make yourself feel better.
Right. That's right. That's what people do. I might go to a bar, might get into an argument, might slug a couple of guys, maybe go to jail, whatever. I mean, but these things happen. But recently, there became a new vehicle. It's not called slugging a guy in the nose. It's called getting hold of a semi-automatic and taking out 20 children. Mm-hmm. That's how you knock out your frustrations. Not adults, not men, not women, mm-hmm. Children, mm-hmm. People, families, mm-hmm. at a mall, at an outing, at a community picnic, mm-hmm. In a movie house. Mm-hmm. That's today's new vehicle, new green light. Uh-huh. That's what we do today. That's what's commonplace in America.
Uh-huh. But the Anti-Defamation League is claiming that the possibility of new gun laws and gun control will solve that problem. How do you feel about that?
We do not believe in free speech or free expression. We believe that things that are offensive should be censored. Mayor Richard Daley of Chicago said it most eloquently. Anybody who goes into a movie theater and screams fire does not have freedom of speech. Freedom of speech to allow people to be exposed to the concept of violence, mass violence, all sorts of gunplay and murder and so forth that you see in 80% of your movies should be banned, should be contraband. They should be put out of work and put out of business. I might make an argument for smut as well, put the whole film industry down the tubes, but I won't do that just yet. That's not the point. That's not the point of our discussion. The point of our discussion is there is violence in this country. Where did we learn it from?
Are you saying it's the media and culture?
You bet it is.
Nightly news?
It's the the nightly news. Wonderful. I got an idea. I'm a pretty nice, decent guy. And I don't believe in violence or anything, and I have a nice family, a couple kids, and this and that. So I make a good living downtown. So what do? I buy a house, a beautiful house, mind you, expensive, in Agoura. Now I drive an hour every day to go to work and an hour back in mid-traffic. It's miserable. But I do it for one reason. Not only because I got a job downtown, but also because I don't want my kids living downtown and my family living downtown exposed to garbage, to gangs, crime. So therefore, what do? I am willing to go and drive an hour to protect my kids. That's what I do. I mean, if downtown was okay, I'd certainly like to live near where I work, wouldn't I? But I have to travel the hour, and nothing I can do about it, in 2 hours, mind you, up and back. However, soon as I get home and I turn on the nightly news, what do? I bring downtown and South Central right to my living room for my kids to see. That's insanity. That's insanity. Exposure to violence makes anyone capable of it. In other words, we don't believe in exposure. We believe in exposure to good deeds, to kindness, to...
By we, you mean the Jewish people?
Right. We, the Jewish people, do not believe in exposing our children or ourselves even to reality. It is not our reality.
Orthodox Jewry, you mean?
That's correct. We do not own guns. We do not have gunplay. We don't do these things.
A lot of you don't even have television.
Television? Most of us don't. Who would have a TV? I mean, I'm not watching Ozzie and Harriet anymore, or Dr. Marcus Welby. For that, I might buy a TV to see how nice families act, to see how a doctor treats the patients, but to see the gunplay, the cops, the criminals, criminality, and so forth. I wouldn't want to expose my children to that or myself to that. Bottom line is that the exposure that the media, and particularly the movies, has done, has corrupted, has destroyed the fabric of American life and the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's been compromised. Now, I know 150 years ago, John Wayne ruled the West. Maybe it wasn't John Wayne, maybe it was Jesse James, whoever it was, and there was a lot of gunplay.
Right.
Never was there gunplay like today. I'd go back to the Old West any day. Okay? No one shot children. No one had a semi-automatic and took out 20 in one shot. That wasn't done. So you had a duel. And one guy was faster than the other guy. As John Wayne once said, faith can move mountains, but it can't beat a faster draw. So, okay, that's what you do. But today's world is a dangerous world. It is a world where every single homeowner is fenced in. We in Brooklyn, we grew up in the 50s and 60s, had a beautiful home on Bedford Avenue. No one had a fence around their house, much less the kind of barricades that today's homes build, because people are afraid. Because there's licentiousness all over the place. And frankly, the cops are handcuffed. They should be handcuffing, and they're handcuffed instead by all these liberal rules that say, well, give him his rights, read him his rights. You don't read a right to a guy who's shooting. You shoot him. And you don't even bring him to trial. You shoot him and save lives. That's what we call in Hebrew, seichel, intelligence, minimal intelligence. Today we have people these liberals who are giving us all these rights and being careful with the victims and so forth, with the perpetrators, not with the victims, mind you, but with the perpetrators. You know why? Because they live behind those barricades. That's why they don't mind if people in South Central, you understand, get hurt because of the people that they're trying to protect. At the end of the day, the issue is here, we have an epidemic in the United States of America. It is scary, it is frightening. I had the other day a student who acted a little out of in my classes, who acted a little out of line. I said, don't come back. Because I'm a little scared of this guy's behavior. Now, am I scared he's going to come back and shoot up my class? You bet I am. You bet I am. Every single person in these United States of America should be afraid and should be protecting their kids. Everyone. There is no such thing as being, unless maybe you want to live in North Dakota. But if you're living anywhere in big cities or whatever, in Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago, you're in a lot of trouble. I know you can opt for the suburbs. Detroit has no city left. Detroit is totally suburbs. Yeah. Fact of the matter is, we need to curb the epidemic. How do we stop the epidemic? By curtailing those movies and having a little better news reporting in terms of better stories rather than all these dangerous and horrible crimes that are committed by murderers and robbers and so forth. We need to have a sense of censorship in this country, and that is a constitutional obligation.
But who would establish what's the line for what's acceptable or not?
Well, I could do that. I mean, of course, I'm certainly fair and objective. Okay. But aside from me, it should be something that needs to be legislated by the Congress and go through the law and become a constitutional. If 1965 Lyndon Johnson was committed to civil rights, how'd he do it? He pushed through legislation. Push it through. I know we have to go through the process. That's constitutional. That's fine. Push it through. I want 80% of those movies banned, destroyed, burnt. I want movies that show evil, criminality, and violence not to be shown, so that people will not think of this as an option. Because crazy people think of only the options that they are exposed to that they can do. No one is thinking of expressing himself or his craziness by jumping off the roof, because nobody does that. But they are thinking about shooting. Sure, especially children. How do you go after children? That's a concept that we have all of a sudden, somehow or another, expose ourselves to. Because you see, it doesn't matter. Once you expose violence in any manner, gunplay, weaponry, and so forth, and these movies with all sorts of horror and deaths and dying, it doesn't matter who dies. Adult, kid, don't make a difference. Men, women. You know that when you have that kind of exposure to violence, it becomes an option for expressing my issues, and you really have to find a way to stop this exposure. That's the main issue in the United States of America. Now, of course, we can go around blaming and say, well, it's all Trump's fault, this fault, that fault. Hey, you want to blame, but that's not really addressing the issue. That's taking out your own personal agenda at the expense of these dead children. What you should be doing is addressing the issue on a psychological level. Exposure is a major psychological impression, and that has to be curbed. And legislation has to be made to determine what can Hollywood produce. We have limitations on guns. Maybe excessive, maybe not so, depending on how you look at it. But there are limitations. So I want limitations on those movies, just like there's limitations on advertising cigarettes. I want to smoke a cigarette. My legal right in the United States of America. You can't advertise. Well, I want that also the same thing for these movies. I want limitations and restrictions placed on them and banned if necessary.
On violence.
You bet. On violence.
Tone down the violence.
And the violence has to be defined. And it can't be, well, this is very excessive violent, and that's mild violence. We don't even tolerate mild violence. Violence per se is an evil thing for kids to see. Now you take an average young man in America, 16 years old, watching TV, going to the movies. How many deaths have you think he has witnessed in his life?
Oh, plenty.
I don't know, maybe in the 20 or 30 thousands. You take a yeshiva boy, a Jewish boy who learns Torah in the yeshiva, who's never seen the movies, thank God, never seen TV. He's never seen that stuff or that garbage. But you know what he's learned to do? He's learned to figure out 20,000 ethical problems and situations of doing good and following God's way. That's what he's done. That's his exposure.
Okay. What is it?